Thank you, Jake. Can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. And everybody remote can hear? Looks like a thumbs up. For everybody watching, the room is packed and everybody's super excited to be here. So you're really missing out. You should be here in person next year. But thanks everybody for coming in. What we want to talk about today, at Optimize Cyber, we're a cyber risk management firm focused on building, assessing, road mapping, and testing cyber risk programs for organizations. What we want to highlight today is traditionally cyber risk, cybersecurity is thought of as a cost center. And certainly it costs money to run these, but more and more these days, there's opportunities for both revenue growth, cost savings, and protecting your revenue. So we really want to talk about this in terms of how managing cyber risk can increase your revenues or maintain higher revenues, what organizations need to do to protect themselves, and what some of the most important factors are, and then how you can save money, where a lot of organizations have an opportunity to become more efficient in their cyber risk program. Jake gave a little background on us, so I'm going to skip this slide and get right into some of the cyber risk revenue areas where we can really help folks safeguard their money. First of all, everybody knows that cyber incidents are painful. I'm not going to do show of hands for who's had a cyber incident, but those of us, prior to this firm, I was in the incident response space. And I can tell you, even if you have insurance, even if it's the least painful incident possible, any sort of headlines, any sort of business interruption, even if it's only 24, 48 hours, can be really costly. There's statistics publicly that 80+% of, I should have worn my glasses today, 80+% of organizations saw customers leave them because of a cyber incident. So we got to be very mindful. That's not just about cybersecurity and your IT security practices. That's why we need to have a cyber risk management program and be prepared in how we communicate to clients and how we're resilient throughout the incident. Business interruption losses continue to be the largest expense during a ransomware incident. Cyber insurance carriers are, frankly, losing a lot of money in this space because of downtime. And finally, keeping these are really difficult to quantify, but the soft dollar losses of having your organization's name in the news. Obviously, when you're prospecting to new clients or just trying to expand business relationships you have today, if Google results show cyber incidents, that's not good for anyone. Areas for higher revenues. So after years of discussion, is anybody here in the DoD supply chain, or do any of your organizations work under an organization that is in the DoD supply chain? Perhaps may not be relevant, but I will point out there's a lot of organizations you would not think of as Department of Defense supply chain. And now that CMMC, which is a DoD initiative, has been rolled out, organizations won't be able to. It's gonna close up business opportunities and conversely open up business opportunities that are managing cyber risk and meeting some of these requirements to be in the supply chain of any organization that makes money from the Department of Defense. Beyond that, we're seeing more and more customers come to us that are just that conduct business with any large organization, any Fortune 500. I don't want to name names, but a lot of different Fortune 500 companies have been auditing their supply chain. So people that are doing very obscure things, I'm talking HVAC services, customer loyalty programs, things like that. We've seen this year come to us because a Fortune 500 has audited all of their supply chain and said, if you're selling us services, you need to meet these requirements from a security standpoint. So this becomes an opportunity not just to obviously maintain our current clients, but there's going to be opportunities to win new clients. So for those of us in this room that are taking a leadership role, that are being proactive about security, for the first time in our lives, or perhaps for the first time in our careers, we actually have an opportunity to drive revenue and think strategically about some of these initiatives, achieving some of these levels where some of your competition can't compete for these same contracts. So now we're going to get into the broken state of cybersecurity. I'm going to hand that over to Stefan to take us through what we're seeing.
Thank you, sir. Hi, everybody. Oh, yeah, that is small. All right. I might be looking over there a little bit. I'm the CEO, but also a practitioner still, so I wore my traditional hacker garb to represent that crew a little bit. So the first thing I wanted to cover is kind of where we're at today. I've been doing this, IT and security for almost 20 years now, both hands-on in the trenches work, helping secure organizations, but also as a consultant for the last decade. There's a pretty common theme I see, and I don't want to sound too negative about it, but I also want to speak, I want to be real about it to everybody, is that cybercrime is worse than ever right now. We're seeing bigger numbers globally. The 10.5 trillion isn't just like damages, it's like overall cost estimation, and the cybercrime market as well is included in that number. But it's huge, right? It's like an insurmountable amount of money we're talking about here. It's just to show that this is a really impactful thing globally now, not just to national security, not just to the commercial sector, but it's affecting all of us, and we really haven't gotten a good grasp on how to control for it. We're seeing a really a continuous growing sophistication of attacks. The classification of these attacks is pretty much the same as it's always been, right? Business email compromise through social engineering, account takeovers, credential reuse. Ransomware is a little bit roller coasty in how much we see every year, but it's still a very real thing. And now we have destructive malware is back, right? We have some state actors out there that are, they don't want to ransom your data. They don't want to get into your backups and hold it hostage. They just want to wipe it out and cause financial damage to the economy. So it's kind of worse than ever, but it's also kind of the same usual suspects if you really get to the fundamentals. Why? Well, I have some opinions on that. I'll share a few today. The other thing that I want to cover is the average cost of a data breach does continue to climb. It's climbing a little less slowly. We're at about 4.5 million today. That's an average, of course. Some people experience less. Some people experience way more. Matt and I personally have definitely seen people experience right around that number a whole bunch of times, and it's never a fun day for that organization. It affects all of the employees if it's commercial, right? A lot of times that money's not recovered. You don't generally get all of that covered by cyber risk insurance, and now you're looking at, whoops, we had a huge breach. We have all these penalties and all this extra stuff we got to do, as well as leadership has to deal with, well, we might not be giving out bonuses this year, things like that. So. See if I can manage to use a button here. Okay, I did it. We have some systemic problems is kind of the moral of the story here. We've been very reactive with cybersecurity. Kind of like IT is often viewed as kind of a cost center, not the core of the operation. But if you really step back, even in like a logistics company or a manufacturer, what's driving operations? What does everything rely on? I bet you 90 plus out of 100 times, that's technology, right? Information, how we process the information systems to drive things, whether it's physically, whether it's logistically, making decisions. All this stuff relies on technology. We got to protect it because it's under constant attack. It's just the reality of the way things are today, right? We stand up servers all the time for pen testing, things like that. And when we're building out infrastructure, sometimes we'll open it up as a test. Within 2 minutes, it's getting hit on AWS. Brand new server, some random IP. That's how fast stuff is starting to get analyzed by threat actors and other things out there. We're kind of over-reliant on active defenses still. I can't tell you how many times, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, you can name any of the top brands of like EDR, XDR, MDR, whatever. People out there can get around it. Or you don't even need to get around it because fundamentals are bad. I've been on pen tests inside the last 6 months where we did stuff on servers, database servers, things like that, and not to pick on CrowdStrike, but they didn't catch it in time. We got what we wanted out of it. Then they caught it and kicked us out, but we already had the goods. That's reactive, right? It's not enough. If they had good controls in place to limit the features and the functionality on that server for generic users, we never would have been able to do that. That doesn't cost a subscription. That just costs time going through and getting good at the fundamentals and being diligent with that. which means you really have to rely on having a healthy security program that has these cyclical components to it to really keep those things in check. As we discover new vulnerabilities, new classes of attacks, new techniques, tactics, procedures, we've got to lock stuff down further. We've got to take those attacker tools out of the toolbox permanently. One thing I've been picking on lately, if you see me on LinkedIn, is talking about the old mentality of users are the weakest link. Of course they are, right? Humans are fallible. There's no guarantee that none of us will ever make a mistake. I will own up to, I've made mistakes. I fell for a phishing test once in my career before I got into consulting, thankfully. But it can happen to anybody, right? It's circumstantial usually. So if we know that, why are we blaming that as the cause? If our security program has this huge hole in it where the users are the weakest link and we haven't taken action to set controls in place to make sure, well, knowing they are, let's protect the environment as best we can. If we know they're going to be compromised, so let's not give them access to everything. Let's pare down functionality. Let's limit the extent of when they do get compromised, because they will, right? It's a matter of when, at some point. The last piece there is we do still have some pretty critical security knowledge gaps. Not everybody needs to be a security expert on everything. I know enough to know I never will be. It's a constantly changing thing with the different technologies and tools and all this and that, but the fundamentals stay the same. So my recommendation is learn the fundamentals really well. If you have responsibility for managing part or all of a security program, know what vulnerability management really entails, right? There's hundreds of books on this stuff. You can also watch a couple of YouTubes and get pretty dangerous with it. Vendor management, third-party risk oversight, all of those things. We have resource challenges, and I'll speed up a little bit here. This is getting back to looking at it as a cost center, right? Security, if you've got it on, we specialize in helping people be really efficient with it, finding where we're going back over our tracks with different processes and things like that, and simplifying that so that we're just doing it once. If it's a once-a-year review of things, let's make sure we're organized and that we've tracked everything and logged everything so we can do it and feel confident that we got everything, right? It's about that diligence and just going through some of these fairly mundane processes once a year, once a quarter, depending on the amount of risk we're talking about, really helps you keep things in check as the environment constantly changes. As we roll out, we got Windows 10 going end of life next, October 2025? There's going to be a bunch of migrations to 11 there to handle, things like that. We want to make sure we catch that so that those don't create new vulnerabilities in the environment. IT is very organic. A lot of complexity with frameworks, security frameworks. NIST CSF, I've been working with that for a decade, and I can stare at the spreadsheet all day long, and it's a great resource, but it's not just a great fit for anybody, and it's also in science terms, basically, right? It's not the most easy thing to work with. Simplifying your process, you don't have to fill every requirement of a framework. You need to meet your compliance requirements when it's regulatory or industry requirements. But you really want to just find a good model and follow what's best practice. The cheat code for that, honestly, and I'm biased because I'm part of a consulting firm and been doing it a long time, but the best way is to bring in an expert, get your feet wet, find somebody that takes a coaching-based approach and can kind of brain dump with you and explain, here's what we recommend, here's why, here's what to do, and here's the priority to do it in. That's going to get you way further down the road than trying to reinvent the wheel yourself. Because you have 40 other hats you're wearing usually too, right? I've been an IT director, and security was one of a million things I had to juggle. Then I already harped on the last piece, but the weak fundamentals, the point is, I've got clients we've worked with that spend $250,000 a year on a really high-end active defense system to monitor stuff, to catch stuff at the endpoint and on the server. We've pen tested them several times, and we always find stuff. We always find a way in, find a way around it. A sophisticated attacker has way more time than a consulting firm does typically, right? Because we're operating on a budget, and we don't want to waste their money. Attackers might have a whole year. I've taken training with Mandiant before, some of the bigger enterprise incident response firms out there. This was years ago now with this one, but they'd seen cases where attackers live in the environment for 900 days at a time before they even get a call back from their implant. They're that patient. So this isn't intended to scare people. It's just that we got to get serious about the fundamentals. It really hasn't changed there, and you can do so much with what you already have, or you bring in some expertise to help you do that and get it locked down. A lot of it is set and forget stuff, and then it's just the care and feeding. So you've really simplified your life that way. Okay, so along that line is, understand where you're at. I was just saying this to Matt before, but you're not going to build a house without a tape measure and a speed square, right, at minimum, typically. It's not going to look real great, and it's probably not going to be real sturdy. Just like that with the security program, there's so much complexity to it. When we do an assessment, we're looking at, I think we're at about 240 different risk factors that we go through. And we're fast with it, and we're efficient because we do it all day, every day, right? Are you going to wing that? I don't recommend it. You're going to probably miss something. I would if I didn't have, all the time in the world to build out an assessment to make sure I don't miss stuff. So the point is really be efficient with your time. If your time is limited in this space, or if it's part of an overall role that you have, bring in some expertise to help. It's really good bang for the buck versus trying to do it yourself. And it also eliminates waste on spend. You might end up getting the wrong solution and still having weak fundamentals. And now you've kind of, that can't protect you as good as it can if you have strong fundamentals. Strategic planning, you can't really do that. You can't manage what you haven't measured, right? So step one is measure, understand where you're at, get some guidance on what needs to be done, factor that into your strategic planning, budgeting, working through internal politics to get support or buy-in or funding or whatever the case might be. Those are all realities I'm sure everybody in this room deals with to some degree. And then implementing, whether you implement it in-house or you decide the better ROI is to bring in third-party support to help with some of the I call it mundane, but like the daily operations stuff. Do you have somebody in-house that can watch logs all day, or do you want a third-party team to be responsible for that? There's some nice, CYA factor to that too, by the way. And also these days, I wish I was an IT director today sometimes with all the cool services you can get, because they also come with warranties. So if you do it right, you have strong fundamentals, you can leverage some third parties to extend your team. You're not outsourcing security, you're using them as essentially, part-time employees essentially. They're going to watch around the clock because they have a huge team economy of scale to do that. That's where I see the big wins today. Those are the systemic problems I see today. We're really trying hard to change our messaging on that, so it's not just, we got to do our annual pen test, got to do our annual risk assessment, and it really, some folks out there, banks, credit unions, they've been doing it for 20 years, easily. And it's not necessarily totally changing the game for them. We're still seeing people get hit with the same old stuff, and we're still dealing with the same old strategies, so we got to kind of change that dynamic and that status quo. Just a real quick I'm using mine as an example. We're not the only ones out there doing this, but I'd say there's not a whole lot of folks out there doing it the way we are, where we're not just walking through the NIST cybersecurity framework. To my point earlier, it doesn't really cover all the fundamentals that a business needs to worry about, and it's a little more theoretical focused. It's a very valuable tool. It's awesome. I'm a big fan of NIST, but it's a framework. You're supposed to mold that to your organization and decide what you need out of it. So it's not the risk assessment really, right? It's guiding you through the best practices, but you need to figure out where the risks are, how you need to approach those. That's what a real risk assessment can do for you, especially from a third party that specializes in it. You should also expect, coming out of something like that you've got a really clear roadmap. What are the 3 things we got to do this year? If we don't do anything else in this big report, in this big analysis, what are the 3 things we do, and how should we do them? That's what you can get from a third party, expert that's going to come in and help guide you through that process and be there to support you as questions come up. I think that's kind of all I'll cover here. I won't go through all the bullet points, but the other piece is, don't test. I see a lot of people buying pen tests, things like that, before they've really done an assessment. They're kind of executing on stuff with gut feel versus measuring it, right? Is a pen test really the best place to start every time? Not necessarily. Do you have strong vulnerability management? Then maybe. It all kind of depends. Don't buy solutions to solve your security problems until you've really vetted out what is the problem, what do we really understand about it, and take those measurements. Take your time doing that. Everything else gets way easier from there. And then you don't have to rework stuff because you missed something later. And that's all. Back to you, Matt.
That's all the important stuff. One thing I wanted to add to that is I know a lot of people in this room, a lot of organizations globally, up until 2018, maybe up until today, a lot of organizations have not taken security very seriously. For folks that have, they've built their security stack on top of, I was with an organization in South Dakota yesterday who bought laptops and then added Office 365, and then they started buying business applications, and now they have this jumbled spider web of a lack of an IT strategy. that's costing a lot of money. So when we talk about some of these cost saving factors, sometimes there's a lot of redundancies or there's waste just from year over year turnover. Sometimes IT directors have turned over in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years and don't really know what we inherited, don't know what we're spending money on. So sometimes when we break it down to the basics and build it back up and keep what we need while streamlining other areas, there can be we talk a lot about how budgets are constrained and stressed, but a lot of times we're finding some redundancies or waste that our IT director counterparts have inherited. So by starting with a strategy first, there's a lot of cost savings for a lot of organizations that are available based on reevaluating everything that our counterparts have inherited. To keep things more simple, especially for business audience in the room, cyber risk management, we can get, obviously there's a lot of technology. You can spend $1 million a year before you put your socks on by watching too many marketing videos and buying all the solutions off the shelf. So when we talk about cyber risk management, we are looking at it in terms of having a cyber risk management strategy, right? What's important to us? What are we protecting? What are the risks we have already fixed? What are the risks we want to address in the next 6 months? What are the risks that we can't afford to address, but we need to roadmap towards in the future? That's that whole road mapping process we discuss. Using that strategy, we can then inform 24/7 IT and security purchases and decisions and strategies, whether that's internal IT, external IT, flex care IT that supplements your teams. Making sure everybody's working off the same strategy and singing from the same song sheet can be really beneficial, or playing the same drums. I probably should have gone with, but and then using those two baselines to inform your cyber insurance purchases. Can't tell you. I mean, well, I can make a guess that it's probably 70% of organizations we talk to, IT and security decisions are made over here, and cyber insurance purchase is made over here. Well, that doesn't make a whole hell of a lot of sense, because the risk that we're insuring is in the hands of these people. So to go out and make an insurance purchase without incorporating our IT and security leadership and our IT and security strategy certainly leaves gaps, but equally important, we're probably not representing our risk very well. If you have a strong cyber risk management strategy and strong 24/7 IT and 24/7 IT security practices, your cyber insurance should reflect that. So a lot of times we're going into organizations and able to help them lower their cyber insurance premiums 10, 20, 40%, because we're able to unify a strategy and bring all these three pieces together. So when we talk cyber risk management strategy, my advice for technical counterparts in the room is try to keep it simple for leadership. Make sure they understand we're trying to protect the company and meet our requirements and be able to open new revenue opportunities while always, avoiding downtime, but without making it a tech problem. This is an organizational problem. If you have a cyber incident and your CEO tweets about it, there's nothing IT can do to stop that, right? That's an organizational that we all need to be aligned on. And some of those types of decisions that sound funny, but I've lived through, can be extremely costly. Some other areas to save money. So a differentiator in winning RFPs, winning new RFPs, new bids, going through either whether it's an M&A where organizations are consolidating or where people are vetting you as a new vendor, those go a lot faster when you have a cyber risk management program ready. I think about it in terms of, like, if you're getting audited by the IRS, you do not want to say, yeah, let me go look in the basement and try to find those receipts, right? No, you want to hand them the folio from 2023 and say, yep, here's everything. Let me know if you have any questions. That's where we want to be from a cyber risk standpoint. On top of that, not only for due diligence, but the number 2 highest expense in a cyber incident, in ransomware incidents specifically. Anybody want to venture a guess in the room? We already said downtime's number 1. Anybody want to venture a second? What's number 2? kind of a tricky one. So Jake had the answer, but he's being shy. The second largest category, and this is growing rapidly, is follow-on lawsuits, the class action lawsuits that follow incidents. University of Minnesota lost like 14 people's records, and they got hit with a class action lawsuit. There's lawyers that are making a lot of money litigating these, and rightfully so in a lot of cases. Some of these organizations have been negligent. But we need to be prepared, like not just for downtime, not just to get back up and running and have resilience as an organization. You need to be prepared for potential litigation following a cyber incident as well. If you don't have a well-documented and laid out cyber risk management strategy, that'll be difficult to defend yourselves in that lawsuit. Sorry, I thought I heard a question. We'll get to questions in just a second here. The other operational savings, we talked a lot about redundant tools, being able to streamline things and make sure that you're maximizing the tools you already own. So streamlining our spend can sometimes reduce overall spend while increasing security. And I mentioned lower insurance premiums. Also, taking an approach that's proactive to security can save a fortune when it comes to compliance, because everybody in this room is going to have a new compliance framework within the next 4 years. Just based on the rate of new regulations around cyber by different industries, they're ramping up at the local municipal level, at the state level, and at the federal level, and at the international level. So by having your own strategy that you can then build to whatever the new framework is, we know it's going to be based off of NIST. We just don't know exactly what it's going to be. Having your strategy ready and then building to it becomes a lot faster than starting from scratch every time, because we don't have a coherent, unified cyber risk management strategy. So then when CMMC rolls out, we have to go chase 240 new controls, and we don't know where we are on them. Well, if we already have a strategy for the vast majority of those and just need to extend it to some new special 20, 30 categories, can save a fortune by doing the homework up front. So that's our call to action for everyone, is take a proactive approach to this stuff. For those of you who said, I saw some heads nodding that folks haven't necessarily taken IT security as serious as they need to. I understand why. It can be daunting, and for the vast majority of our clients that are really starting or solidifying a cyber risk program for the first time, they picture that it's going to be much more expensive than it is. This is not as well, with the right strategy, it's not as complex and it's not as expensive as the majority of us are thinking. So take that first step and try to take a proactive approach here, because it can benefit you in terms of maintaining revenue, landing new revenue, lower operational expenses, and all the rest. So that's all we've got. I will mention that we are live on the air, and this is being recorded. So before we get into the Q&A, if anybody has a specific question, if you're going to ask about your aunt or your grandma or your mother-in-law did something in particular, leave the names out of it, because it's getting recorded, right? So anyway.
I've got a question. I get asked all the time, how much insurance should I have for cyber liability? And I know it varies. How much insurance should I have for cyber liability? And I know it varies organization by organization, but is there things that you have in mind that would help dictate that answer?
The correct answer is it depends, but I'm not going to give you that cop-out because that's not really helpful. I'll say at a high level, at a minimum, if you're at 100 million, you should have at least 1 million. If you're 100 to 200 million, you should have at least 2 million. If you're 2 million or 200 million to 300 million, you should have at least 3 million. Think at least $1 million per 100 million band of revenue. And everybody under 100 million should have at least 1 million.
Awesome. Who else has questions? Chad?
No questions? No questions. Good deal. We'll stick around a little bit after this and and we also have a booth in there. You can find us at optimizecyber.com or coaching at optimizecyber.com if you want to reach out via email, but our website, optimizecyber.com. Or actually, don't do that. Talk to your rep, and they'll get us connected, and we'll be our best first step. So thanks all for your time, and yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Steph.